We'll start by the singing of O Canada. Thank you for that, David. So we need approval of agenda. Joe Andrews, Debbie. Disclosures of direct or indirect pecuniary interest. Oh, sorry. All those in favor? Unanimous? Disclosures of direct or indirect.
With. There is a growing idea of natural capital. When we think of asset management and municipalities, we think of infrastructure such as the pipes and the roads and the bridges. Some of those are major parts of what are going to concern you tonight. But other municipalities are now treating key ecosystems like aquifers and streams and forests and valleys as infrastructure assets, building them into the budgets and plans along with the standardized engineered assets. So a thought occurs to me about some of the issues that face the town and that, for instance, occupied a fair amount of time during the first council meeting. We know that water is likely to be a limiting factor in the development of Orangeville, continue to be. Of immediate note is the need to expand the sourcing of groundwater into Amaranth and the need to protect our surface water sources and the aquifer that they feed. For instance, the still court issue that I wrote to you about, and maybe I'm off on that, but maybe I'm not. My concerns about the proposed development near the southeast corner of Broadway and Veterans Way, which, by the way, as best as I can figure out from the maps, was the original public source of water for the town of Orangeville.
Your Worship, through you to Councillor Sherwood, that would be a carry forward. There was a project and there's going to be some funds that would have to come forward. I think it's $15,000 that would reduce that amount. So in reality, it'll be that amount minus the $15,000, which would be the normal budgeted amount.
And through you, Deputy Mayor McIntosh, also I'm just wondering maybe if you could maybe explain the significantly high difference in
times over the annual budget allotment, perhaps.
Of course, for the sustainability plan.
Any further action we need to take on this?
Your Worship, I would leave it to yourself and the member of councils if, after looking at this, if you decide to make any changes to the allocations to the new committees last evening, or to move some of the money into the heritage, economic development, culture area to cover off the projects we just mentioned earlier, that would be the action maybe later today.
Deputy Mayor. There is a motion on the floor that was deferred from last night. That is what's in the agenda in red. So you can deal with it now or deal with it when it's appropriate for council.
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor McIntosh. I apologize for people watching at home. This was added on for this evening, so this is the first chance I've been able to see it in this printed form, and I'm just gapping. Cultural Plan Task Force, we've changed the name on it, so it's really the Arts and Culture Committee. It would be my question. And secondly, there's an asterisk beside the $6,000, yet there's nothing denoting what the asterisk is for, and I just need clarification on that, and then I'm ready to go.
Sorry about the asterisk. I put it in for my reference and then forgot to take it out when I sent it to council.
Councillor Andrews.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor McIntosh. Again, just a question to Mr. Brennan, and you reference, of course, the Economic Development Committee, and I don't see any, and again, I apologize, like Councillor Taylor, some of this we've only had an opportunity to review for a few minutes. I don't see this on this report here, and again, you make reference to the arts and culture funds that you're suggesting to move over, but is there a running tally? I don't have that information in front, so.
Your Worship, through you to Councillor Andrews, I'm not sure if it was formally set up as a committee with any funding to it. So we would have to go back, and from the records that we see right now, there appears to be no allocation of funding to that committee. However, again, if council wants to put some from dollars to that committee, we can certainly look at it tonight. We will check as we move forward here to see.
Yes, I know. Through you, Your Worship, to Mr. Brennan, and again, not to put anybody on the spot, having been previously on that committee, this is maybe an assumption, and I always thought that there had been an allocation of funds, but again, we may not have been presented that information. And again, with the utility box project and some of the other points of reference that you highlighted here, I think it's imperative that we at least have some clarity and some funds for that particular committee moving forward. What the amount would be, again, I don't want to speculate, but I think it's imperative that, if the allocation that you're talking about is going to be moving into that particular committee, that's one thing. But to have an understanding of what the amounts would be moving forward for that committee also would be important to know.
Your Worship, through you, again, the recommendation would be from the funds for the Arts and Culture Committee for the utility boxes, for the bursary program, and the other item that was mentioned. The recommendation was that it would go to the Economic and Culture Division so the department within the town to run those programs. Now that they are well established in the town staff could run them through their program, their divisions. From our records, what we're seeing right now, there appears to be no money allocated to the Economic Development Committee in the previous years.
Through you, Your Worship, Mayor McIntosh, just getting some clarification on that, and again, not to prolong this particular discussion, but that is going to be my one portfolio on council, and I think it's important that I have an understanding of allocation of funds for that particular committee.
Go ahead.
Your Worship, through you, I think Mr. Osmond has something to say, and maybe he can provide some clarity to this.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. My understanding when we're going through our budget deliberations with the Manager of Economic Development and Culture is that we've built that into the operations of the department. So the committee function, the way the committee functions, we'll do it within the department itself. And as the CAO has explained, we want all the pieces that go with some of the functionality of that old committee to come forward in a new budget. But we do see the operation of the committee as part of the operations of the actual department.
Go ahead, Councillor Peters.
I'd be happy to combine the motions to move the funds to the department per the recommendation of the CAO, as well as the budget items laid out in the recently updated agenda for each committee.
Councillor Post.
My intent yesterday when I put this motion forward was under the understanding that the budget laid out for the Cultural Plan Task Force would be to cover those things that we had done previously in the past through the Arts and Culture Committee, such as primarily the Arts Evening is what I was thinking of more than the utility box program. So that 6,000 that I had initially allocated for the Cultural Plan Task Force, my intention for that would be under the understanding that we would continue to take on that arts evening. If it's easiest to move that over and take it out of there, I'm happy to do that. And if we need to add the couple of $1,000s to ensure that the utility box program can continue as well. It looks like the final numbers for the Arts and Culture Committee last year were at $7,300, so call it $7,500. So if we need to change that number from $6,000 to $7,500, and instead of it being allocated in committees to transfer that over into the economic development to take care of those, I'm happy to amend my motion to say that if need be.
Madam Clerk, did you have?
Since there's a motion on the floor moved by Councillor Post, it was seconded by Mayor Brown, but the mover has the right to amend it. So I would suggest that it be as printed with removal of the Cultural Plan Task Force line of 6,000 and that 7,500 be transferred from the Arts and Culture Committee budget to the Economic Development and Culture Division.
So we have that moved by Councillor Peters and Councillor Post. All those in favor? No.
Sorry, the motion is on the floor from yesterday. It doesn't need to be moved again unless Council would like Councillor Peters to second it in Mayor Brown's absence. That might be the cleanest way.
Okay. Councillor Peters seconds it. All in favor? Unanimous? Okay, moving on to the capital budget presentation.
Get to move that to the side. I probably won't need it. Again, thank you, Your Worship. Tonight, staff will present the first draft of the 2019 capital budget. Of course, that would be following last night's presentation of our operating budget. As a brief recap, just from last night, I would just like to recap the actions taken by Council on our operating budget. We started off with the presentation to Council at a 4.13% of tax levy. We have confirmed a 1.24 growth. And with the other actions taken and reductions by Council last night, we are presently at a 0.71% of our tax levy. So an increase of 0.71%. And I would just like to provide clarity that the plan that's put in front of you tonight and the recommendations of staff of all of the capital projects, if endorsed by Council, our tax levy increase would remain at 0.71%. Minus, the only minus on that is that we would have to identify another source of money or funds for the $175,000 that we reduce for the transfer to capital projects. So that's the one caveat. If nothing else changing, we would have to find either a sourcing fund or another way of paying for $175,000 if all the projects were endorsed. So to confirm again, the police services budget was presented and approved by the board, and they're coming in at a 0% increase overall, and there is a capital request around the $57,000 range. On the agenda tonight, we'll look at the strategic review of our 5-year plan, highlights of the capital project, our depth, and our reserve forecast. The intent of the review, the highlights of significant items. Department budgets have been, again, provided on our website and in the agenda packages for all people to view. Feel free to ask questions. We'll try to cover it at a high level, and following the presentation, we will look at, we'll put another data sheet on the screen and start looking at each project and council can ask questions or make decisions as we go. Thanks. So the capital budget focus, we look at a number of things when we're planning a capital budget, as we do with our operating budgets. We do look at the long-term planning. We address the infrastructure needs. We look at our facilities, and the equipment and the vehicles, and how do we keep the such maintained. We look at continued investments into our park and recreation and our events and activities. Continued investment in technology. We have to manage our debts and our reserves, and we plan for future growth. Again, if we look at some of the highlights, 68 million in capital investment over the next 5 years. Right now, if we look at our 5-year plan, we are looking at approximately $68 million investment. There's new debt that's also planned for the Harvey Curry Park in 2019 for approximately $1 million. The fire hall replacement now planned for 2020 is approximately $8 million. And we have an elevator that we have to put in our library at the Mill Street location. That is, we're looking at about $2.5 million. There's a $35 million anticipated increase in reserves. Again, approximately $35 million increase over the next 5 years. If we look at that, capital reserves will increase by approximately $14.8 million. Wastewater reserves about 6.9, where water reserves about 3 million. Rate stabilization about 1.75 million. Then we have development charges at about 4.5 million. Fleet replacement of 550,000. Corporate systems reserve about 500,000, and general insurance reserve about 600,000. Again, this is a slide that we saw last night, and where we started off, what we needed to raise in the tax levy, and again, council at this stage have got this down to 0.71% of our tax levy. Again, from a capital summary, we can look at years 2019 to 2023, almost by division and departments of our town. If we look at the total investment for 2019, it is approximately $10 million. And then we look at some of our funding sources to offset some of this cost. You'll see our gas tax, about $876,000. Some development charges, about $820,000. Reserve funds, again, I hope I'm reading off the same line here. It looks to be about $710,000. Water rates at a $1.7 million. Wastewater rates about $895,000. Different grants totaling about $1.1 million, and financing about $1 million, and some other minor funds for about $60,000. So again, accounting for about $7.3 million, leaving a net tax levy impact of approximately $2.7 million. So if we get in to look at some of the project highlights for 2019 and what staff are recommending, we are looking at a website redesign. Our website has aged, and we certainly want to get a more dynamic website that would help us with our communications. We would be looking at implementation of best practices, clean design and user friendliness, improve online presence and functionality, fast and easy access to the town and services and information. We want to integrate a website with the town's systems, many other systems that we have that we would like to integrate and be a lot more effective and efficient. And of course, integrate with our social media programs. This project is estimated to be about $120,000. There's another project for the Harvey Curry Park, the splash pad. Again, the structure was built in about 2000. We're looking at bringing it up to standards. Required a recirculation system instead of a flow-through system for the water, so we'd be a little more environmentally friendly and saving the consumption of water. Expansion of the current building to house the equipment, to replace the play structures itself, and of course to enhance the splash pad itself. The project is estimated at $1 million. We would be looking at debt financing for it. Anticipated payoff 10 years at approximately 3.5%. We are looking at several parking lots to resurface the parking lots and paving this year. There's a number of our parking lots we are now using for winter parking and overflow parking. So again, a few things to achieve: a reduction in the amount of dust, improve the visual effects of the park, improve accessibility. And some of the parks we were looking at, or D parks that we were looking at, would be Fenley, Rotary Park, Idlewild Park, and Princess of Wales. A total cost impact estimated at $160,000, again to be funded by tax levy. Then we are looking at a project at Curran Court, multi-purpose pad, and it's basically to remove and to upgrade 17-year-old pad. We would rehabilitate the base and then pave with new asphalt. A project estimated at $25,000 on tax levy. At Alder Street Recreation Center, there's a number of HVAC repairs and air handling system repairs and upgrades that needs to be done. This was as a result of a HVAC study we had done last year and the recommendations from our mechanical engineers. Also at our OSPCA building, there's air handling and HVAC upgrades that are required. And again, those totaling approximately $175,000. The former at Alder Street estimated at $75,000. Theater Orangeville, there is a couple of items that we're looking at. The main public counter that's here at 87 Broadway. Again, current counter creates obstructions and difficulties in serving clients. We're looking at updating the counter itself and removing the archway that's right now is an impediment or with the counter. It would improve accessibility and the aesthetics of the counter itself, estimated at $60,000. Again, with the theater, we have some flooring issues. The carpet is in a poor condition and requires replacement. We were looking at approximately $35,000. Both of these projects, again, will be on tax levy. Town Hall basement renovations. We have done several renovations in our Town Hall down to the basement. So this is to be a continuation of that reorganization, renovations and updating. Current staff lunchroom area and accommodate up to about 8 people. Renovations include a larger staff room and a lunchroom. There will be some office areas and cubicle space as well. Also, with the possibility of a shower or 2 showers so that staff and others can have a shower. This building currently does not have a shower for anyone to use. The additions of, we were looking at, again, to increase a healthier lifestyle, promote active transportation, such as walking, running, biking, and others. The projected cost here is about $75,000, again, on the tax levy. Second floor infrastructure services area, complete the office reorganization and configuration, new work stations and petitions, some of the electrical work and carpet replacement, again, $70,000. Another one here at Town Hall, a wonderful building that we're in, but again, it needs some work and repairs. We are looking at window and door replacement. In the older section, the Heritage Building, what we're sitting in right now, a lot of the windows are made of wood. In the newer section, they are made of steel, steel frames, of course. They are very inefficient and single-paned in some cases and need to be replaced. The project is estimated at about $175,000, and that may only get the Heritage side of the building at this stage. Town Hall, second floor flooring replacement. Again, a small area upstairs where the carpet has been heavily worn and stuff. We would replace that carpet, and again, that is estimated about $18,000. That flooring in itself actually would be reflective of the flooring that we have in this building and the atrium right now, or this room. If we look at some of the larger projects, we look at Faulkner Street reconstruction. It is identified in the roads needs study as a priority due to poor condition and surface and structural rating. Water and sewer mains have reached their life expectancy and need to be replaced, and the continuation of construction or reconstruction on the other sections of Faulkner. We are estimating that this project will be around $685,000, $495 in tax levy, approximately $182 in water reserves, and $7,000 in wastewater reserves. Again, Gifford Street is a road that's been identified on our needs study for replacement. The sewer mains, again, have reached their life expectancy and need to be replaced. The town has applied for the provincial OCIF top-up funding, so we're hoping to get that funding for this project. It's estimated about $525,000. Again, $361 OCIF top-up fund, $124,000 in wastewater reserves, and $40,000 in tax levy. Next street on our list is the Little York Street reconstruction. Again, this is a priority in our roads needs study. And again, as per the other ones, our water and sewer mains would be replaced. It is estimated about $1.2 million. Funding from tax levy, $747,000, $266 water reserves, and $191 in wastewater reserves. As you see with a lot of our road projects, because we're replacing and upgrading our water distribution or wastewater collection system, we are using the water reserves, water reserve funds to pay for their portion of the project. Then we have Dawson Bridge rehabilitation, identified as a priority in the biannual bridge inspections. Ontario Structural Inspections Manual outlines the requirements for the maintenance and rehabilitation. It is estimated a $269,000 project to be funded by tax levy. The Tideman Drive Bridge rehabilitation, again, a priority under biannual bridge inspection. It is estimated about $217,000 and to be funded by tax levy. Retaining wall assessment, blind line, civil significant high-value retaining wall structures are on municipal property. The wall is approximately 25 years old and is showing signs of deterioration. The project involves getting a structural engineer in to do the assessment and make recommendations. It could be to remove, replace, or rehabilitate. The budget includes a cost of potential removal and replacement of the wall, may only require rehabilitation at a lower cost, but right now we're projecting it at a $220,000 cost to be on the tax levy. Water supply. The town requires additional water supply capacity to surface growth to build out. A municipal class action or class environmental assessment, EA, is being completed as we speak to determine the preferred solutions, which is likely to require the construction of a new municipal well and treatment facility. Additional funding is required to complete a long-term pumping test. The anticipated design and construction of the new water supply infrastructure is to commence in 2020. Projected cost is $700,000 and through development charges. Well treatment. We have our Goody wells. The Ministry of Environment and Climate Change advised the town that the additional disinfection is required to meet environmental requirements in the Safe Drinking Water Act of 2002. Upgrades of various wells for pre-chlorination, engineering, and SCADA programming services. We're estimating about $875,000, and this will be funded through water reserves. Beeline water main from Alder Street to Spencer is to construct a new 300-millimeter diameter water main on the east side of Beeline between Alder Road and Spencer. This will improve the operational efficiency of the system. Again, project to fund $257,000, $121,000 from development charges, and $136,000 from water reserves. Those projects would have zero impact on our tax levy. Water pollution control plant, digester 1 roof replacement. Again, we're looking at $300,000, project funded by wastewater reserves. Highlighted vehicles, Public Works, street power sweeper replacement. This replacement of a 2009 power sweeper. It reached the end of its life service, well used, heavily used. This project is estimated at $430,000, $100,000 from fleet replacement reserve, $300,000 on a tax levy, and $30,000 proceeds on the disposal of the old loader. A 16-foot cut lawnmower for parks. The replacement of a 2009 mower. This replacement is about $120,000, $80,000 from fleet replacement reserve, and $40,000 from Parks and Recreation reserve. Again, we have an ongoing capital program that we've been running for a few years in the Emerald Ash Borer. We're projecting $47,000 this year to be funded by the tax levy and to remove and replace trees. Again, this is a part of our 10-year plan to address the Emerald Ash Borer. Noise fence replacement is an ongoing project we do so much each year. This year we're looking at $122,000 funded by tax levy. Again, some ongoing capital projects, design of future road projects. We always like to get a project designed a year prior so we can get out to tender early and get construction going early if possible. This year, $80,000, and it allows early construction and tendering. A library collections system, it's $190,000. This is a normal $190,000. It's not an increase in ask. The renewal of resources that are available for members to borrow. It's such things as books, magazines, DVDs, audio, video. So we use that $190,000 to update such materials at our library each year. 2020-2023 capital plan. So highlights of the 2023 capital program to follow. Plan should align with council vision and the corporate needs. Only the 2019 budget will be approved tonight or this year. And the other from the 2020 or future years to 2023 would be adopted in principle. Again, the 5-year plan allowed staff to proceed to plan for future years. It helps us balance out our priorities and our cost, and actually allows us to project our needs in the future years to help council with the decision making. Again, it's a long, exhaustive list, and I certainly won't go through all of it, but if we look at 2020 highlights in the coming years, we're looking at basically a $19 million impact. And there's a couple large items there in 2020, as you see, the most noticeable one being the fire hall, the requirement of a new fire hall for approximately $8 million. Next. In 2021 highlights, again, a long list of projects, and you're getting up to the range of the $20 million. And again, some highlights is the water supply. You see there about $4.5 million, and that's, of course, trying to secure the alternative source of water for our municipality. 2022 highlights. Again, if you look at the list, an extensive list, and we're looking at about $7.8 million. 2023, again, we're up to around the $10 million range. Of course, all of these projects will be looked at in more detail each year, and we would bring better justification for each project that we are recommending in that year. Infrastructure roads, annual investment. Again, looking at the years, our asset management plan, $3.4 million was the annual investment needs. Over the next 5 years, we are looking at approximately $3.9 million, and we are listing there the roads that we will be considering. Little York, Hanson Bridge, Boulevard Bridge, Cardwell, Ontario, Carleton, Mill Street, Victoria, and Green are some of the projects on our roads. For our water, again, we have an annual investment needs of about, from asset management plan, at approximately $2.3 million. The average annual investment over the next 5 years, we are estimating at $3.4 million. If we look the same for wastewater, if we look at our asset management plan, the projected needs was about $1.8 million. And the average annual investment over the next 5 years, we are now predicting is about $600,000. And that would include the digester roof replacement, some trunk sewer capacity increase, and infrastructure for road reconstruction. Infrastructure and other assets, including such things as our facilities, our vehicles, equipment, information technology, and other, looking at an annual investment of 4.3, or the annual investment needs of 4.3. We are looking at an average going forward of a $5.8 million, and that would include the fire hall, the library facilities, Tony Rhodes Rec Center, which we debated last night and will debate going forward, and the Alder Street Rec Center. Again, from the reserves, there's a number of reserves that we have, and we just wanted to highlight here that there may be an estimated prediction of an increase of approximately $35 million going forward in our reserves by 2023. That's from the 2018 date. However, we will have to do some realignments, and because of the actions taken last night, there will be a reduction of basically $175,000 on the base going forward. We do have a revised sheet that we will just show council at this time. So again, you know, we're talking about some high numbers here, and we're talking about projections and estimates. But again, if we keep on track, in 2023, we'll be looking at approximately $66 million in total reserves. So reserve highlights, again, $35 million approximately anticipated over the next 5 years, increase. Capital reserve projects to increase approximately $14.8 million. Potential future uses includes a more aggressively addressing infrastructure backlog and the infrastructure gap. Transfer some to buildings, machinery, and equipment so that we can better plan for the replacement of such. And keep buildings, reserves, and use when grant opportunities. So, of course, when we have reserves available, and when the federal and provincial government comes out with grant opportunities, it's great to have that money available for matching funds and such. Wastewater reserve projects to increase with approximately $6.9 million, and again, to use the infrastructure to address the infrastructure backlog. Development charges reserve, we're looking at an increase of approximately $4.5 million to address growth-related projects, and water reserve projects to increase approximately $3 million, again, to address water infrastructure backlog. Rate stabilization fund at a $1.75 million used towards known and unknown future pressures in the administration and the corporation. General insurance increased to about $600,000 for potential future claims. We're always at risk for claims. It's nice to have some money set aside for such. Fleet replacement reserve projected to increase around $550,000, and again, corporate systems reserve projected to increase approximately $500,000. Here we're looking at the long-term debt. You can see we're going to increase some debt going forward, some new financing. 2019, about $1 million, and that's more towards the Harvey Curry Park rehab and project if council goes forward with it. We're also projecting in 2020 a $8 million financing, and that would be for the fire hall itself. and some in 2021, and I think that may be around waterworks and such. In any case, the good news is if we look, at the budget ending balance at the bottom line, right now we're, in debt about $31 million. With all the planned debt going forward, and we look at 2023, we're actually at a reduction in our debt of about $1 million. So again, bringing some things on debt and financing it, we're saying that there's a way to go forward in a quick return in 2023 to reduce that debt almost down actually below where it is today. So there's a lot of items that we have identified, and actually there will be more that we will identify in our next list as we go through tonight. But one item to consider that we want to discuss is our expansion of existing fiber network to the industrial and commercial areas in the town. What we have been looking at over the last year or so is talking about the need of fiber in our town, especially in our industrial areas. We have talked to staff and our counterparts at the county who's also looking at this initiative. With the SWIFT program that's out from the federal side and the provincial side, that's still trying to get the funding, get straightened away, or I guess to initiate a lot of their projects. But we thought that it would be something that council to consider going forward. Is it something that we want to get into? And what we're saying that there's an opportunity potentially that we look at owning our own fiber network going forward, and maybe we would have open fiber so that our industry could use it and they could go to their provider, be it the Bells, the Rogers, or other, and they could potentially lease fiber off the town. Again, it's a way of looking at trying to move something forward to meet the need of our community and to use it as an economic development driver. What we're asking for here, or what we're asking council to consider potentially, is initial ask of about $50,000. And what we would look at there is get some type of consultants in to do a feasibility study. What would it look like? What would the organization look like? How would we manage this? What are the different ways of approaching it? And of course, we would reach out to our county counterparts to see if there's a joint venture that we could look at to move this forward. So we put it to council tonight just as an item to consider, and we can discuss it further if need be. At this point, I think maybe if there's any questions that we can go around the table.
Thank you for that, Mr. Brennan. Councillor Taylor.
Of reserves, if that were the case, or the project could be deferred.
Thank you. Councillor Post.
Thank you for that, Mr. Jones. Now, with that being said, I'm happy to second the motion.
Any other comments? Okay. Motions on the floor? All those in favor? Passed unanimous. Councillor Taylor.
I'd like to make another motion, please, Deputy Mayor. And that is, I have taken the liberties of asking my good friend David Nairn to come to the events this evening because there's a few things on the agenda that I may need his assistance with as we go forward. So I'll make these individually if that would suit council, but I'd like to make a motion that the flooring for the theater upstairs, the carpet and the vinyl tile in front of the stage, it needs to be replaced. It's $35,000 funded by the tax levy, and I'd like to suggest that we go forward with that. So that would be my motion.
I would second that. So Taylor, Mac. Vote on that? All in favor? Carried unanimous. Councillor Post.
I know I think it's 6.1 in the agenda regarding the item with the internet being added, the $50,000. I think it's really key to note that access to reliable and high-speed internet has become a standard price of admission now for business. It's really no longer considered a luxury. It's a necessity, and our ability as a municipality to provide that access is key to our business sector. It's key in making sure that we can attract new business. I think this is a really great opportunity for us. Not only to me is it a factor in attracting new business, I think it's also a factor in ensuring that our business community that we have is willing to consider growing and staying with us. So with that being said, I would like to move a motion.
Around the building and optimize our actual office space, meeting space, and program space for the community. If that answers your question.
Councillor Taylor.
With all, am I on there? There we go. With all respect to Mr. Osmond,
Then we will look for a final motion.
Councillor Taylor.
yes, thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to speak to item 1, which is the website redesign. I'll ask the question, I guess, is the justification for the 120. It's quite high for a website. Research that I think has been done by a few people on council, not myself, would say that, you know, potentially that we could do something at a little bit lower than that. I guess I was just curious how we come to the 120, and should we pursue other options would be my question to council.
Mr. Osmond, would you like to respond, please?
Through your worship to Councillor Taylor. First of all, Mr. Benito's just entered the room, but I'll throw it to him in a couple of minutes. First of all, the $120,000 we started with came from our research. We talked to the county. The county did a website redesign and major project in 2017. And they went out for bids, and they had 4 bids, and it ranged from $65,000 up to $99 plus. And they went with the low bid, and they started that project in 2017, and they went live with their website. The website for the county is much smaller than what we're looking for. We are looking for an high-end, if you would, website with a lot more pieces attached to it, and the way it engages to the community, and the way we integrate it with all of our operation in the town. The technical information, I'm going to throw it over to Mr. Benito, if he would speak to it, if he could join me up here for a couple of minutes and give you an overview of how we see the website. In terms of the costing, the $120,000 we think is reasonable for what we're looking for in the marketplace.
Through you,
Yeah.
Your Worship, I
Thank you,
just
Dan.
asked you to repeat the question as I wasn't in the room.
Well, I'll let Councillor Taylor ask, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just concerned about the cost of $120,000 for the website design, and I guess my limited capacity with such things, you know, it's a way to explain it in a landman's term. I'd appreciate it.
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Taylor. Yes, absolutely. So what we are looking at here is not just a website redesign. What we are looking is to go to a web application. So what that means is you have a website which gives you your basic delivery of services and will look beautiful, and it has a lot of static content on it. But what we're looking to move towards is applications, delivery of our services. So we have a lot of existing systems we have now. For example, like our recreation system we just implemented last year. It has a lot of data in it. That data gets updated by program managers. We would like that to instantaneously be able to go to our website. In order to get to that point, that requires what's called back-end programming as well as front-end programming. When you start getting into that, it requires direct connections into databases, and it's a much more advanced kind of level of programming, basically, if that answers your question.
Councillor Andrews.
Thank you very much through your worship to Mr. Benito. Just for clarification, you know, the back and the front end, when something like this is implemented, are you looking at also the ability of
2 projects in the fencing area where we're involved with tennis courts, and both the fences are in pretty bad shape, and that's why we're taking these fences down. It may be an opportunity for us to remove the fence and not replace it until we do the project for the asphalt piece. At this point, we can do it another way. We can do it so that we do our end post, our end fence, and leave our side fence, which is not uncommon. So people playing tennis don't lose the ball doesn't go astray on the back end. So we could take a look at other opportunities how we approach it. I don't disagree with you that you would have to take down a section of fence to get our asphalt machine in. It's not a small or a big asphalt machine. It's a very small machine. We do these kinds of sites. So it depends how we approach it. Right now, the staff would like to get the fence piece taken care of and move forward the asphalt in the future. We could revisit it and look at the fence in a different approach and not complete the entire fence. Do 2 sides and then do the other 2 sides. We do the asphalt.
Sorry, just for clarity, where exactly is this again? Is this? Sorry.
It's Kin Family Park, and the second one is at the Idlewild site.
So the Idlewild, so that's the former Lions Club pool, I believe, and pool building. Is that correct?
You're correct, Your Worship.
Again, I'm by there quite frequently, and I wonder about that fencing by the pool building, because the surface is pretty sad, and, you know, I wonder if that's another opportunity for green space, because I don't think it's really used very much, right, that tennis court. So, yeah. And is the ask for fencing and asphalt in the budget for Idlewild?
Your worship, it's all fencing.
It's all fencing, okay. So you're not talking about doing anything with the surface there at all? Yeah.
No, that's correct.
Okay. Okay, Councillor Sherwood.
Yes, Your Worship. I actually want to discuss a different item, so shall I wait until this one is finished, or are we ready to move on?
No, we haven't done anything yet with this, no. Did you make, okay. Councillor Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just for clarity, I was speaking of the Kin family courts, not the Idlewild courts necessarily, which I thought was actually the tennis club itself, not the public one, if you will. So it was really about the combination of the refencing and then coming in and repaving, which I thought was a bit of an overlap there on the Kin side. So if that doesn't exist to the same degree, or if, you know, we can do it in stages to keep the usability of that surface. Obviously, I don't want it to be unusable for 2 years, but I don't want to tear up a brand new fence either. So it sounds like Mr. Osmond can stage that accordingly, and I would sort of withdraw any changes to the motion on those fencing items.
Councillor Sherwood? Go ahead.
We're ready to talk about mine then?
Yes.
Okay. I would like to bring to the attention of council the various parking lot paving of $160,000. Again, would be really nice to have for parking lots nicely paved. But I'm wondering if we could maybe do this in a two-part step and maybe do 2 of the 4 parks this year.
Okay, Councillor Peters, you want to comment on that?
Yes, please. I was going to bring this up later, actually. I don't support paving any of the lots at this point. I know that, again, like you said, it would be nice. It would aid in winter maintenance. I have spoken with Mr. Jones about this. You know, I don't believe that this is a critical piece of infrastructure to be paving. I live very close to the Rotary and Idlewild parking lots. I don't believe that the dust aspects or sort of the aesthetics are an issue at all. And further, the stormwater issues, as we heard from Mr. Whitcomb earlier, and as a passion of sort of myself and the sustainability community.
Potholes and maintenance. But can you give us the reasoning why they felt the need for paving 4 parking lots?
Your Worship, I may have to, first of all, to Councillor Sherwood. This is kind of a collaborative effort between ourselves and infrastructure. We share these parking lots, and my learned friend to my right, he actually has those parking lots in use during the winter months for overuse parking. And it's become a bit of a concern for us in terms of winter to summer. And the asphalt is something that really supports what he's doing in the winter. And from our perspective, yeah, I mean, I don't disagree that you can do it with gravel, but the actual site for us from a maintenance perspective, it is easier to maintain when it's asphalt versus soil. I don't disagree that you can look at other ways of doing it, you know, with different types of ways for proper drainage and that kind of thing. But I'll ask my General Manager of Infrastructure if he'd like to speak to the issue.
Mr. Jones.
I think that Mr. Osmond did an excellent job of explaining it. I mean, as it relates to Fendley and Rotary, these are the parking lots that are utilized in the winter for overflow parking. When they are gravel, they are more difficult to maintain. during the winter, and it gives us an inconsistent level of maintenance across parking lots that people are using in the winter. I don't think it's a coincidence that these parking lots have been unpaved because they have typically not been used in the winter until the last couple of years where we have used them for overflow parking.
Right. I'm curious, though, to go down the path that Councillor Peters has suggested, and that is permeable surfaces. And, you know, we've had, again, I've been here 27 years. We've had some serious flooding going on in the past couple of 2-3 years. And, you know, I'm not an expert or an engineer, but the hard surfaces that have happened and continue to grow in our municipality have got to have something to do with it. So if we can find a solution that's permeable and that allows your winter maintenance to go on, even if it's a little bit more money, I think it might be worthwhile investigating. So my thoughts are, if we defer this paving item, do a little more homework on permeable surfaces, and again, we're going to be back talking about budgeting in the fall, perhaps early enough that maybe we can earmark some money for you in the near term rather than right now. That would be my suggestion. So let's go to Councillor Andrews.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. And again, we had a passionate statement this evening at the beginning of council. And, you know, taking to heart, you know, the view of permeable, and I absolutely agree with Councillor Peters and the others at this table here. You know, we have to take a look at ways of ensuring that we are repatriating the water in our community. I also respect the points that both Mr. Osmond and Mr. Jones have put forth here regarding winter maintenance, but you know, we've had those locations the way they are, and I think that to your suggestion, Mayor Brown, to look at it in the fall would be a wise decision.
Right. Sorry, folks. So we had a motion on the floor, correct, to defer that item? I'm sorry, Councillor Sherwood.
Yes, Your Worship, I was just going to ask, is there a motion on the floor, and what is it? Because I would ask for a friendly amendment to it.
Madam Clerk.
It was moved by Councillor Peters, seconded by the Deputy Mayor to remove the parking lot paving from the 2019 budget.
Okay, so we've had quite a discussion about it. I think it's time to call a vote.
Is it possible to add that 2 of those parks be brought back in the 2020 budget? I'm thinking the 2 that cause issues with the snow.
I would
winter
think
maintenance.
all of them should be brought back for discussion, you know, and I think that might be the direction. And then, again,
So for
at
now,
that
we're gonna
time, we
remove
can,
Okay.
if we think, but thank you, the whole idea of permeable surfaces, I think we need to go down that path, understand likely the, you know, extra cost for that, but I think, again, because of flooding issues and just sustainability, environmental concern, that we need to, as a municipality, be progressive in those areas. So, and again, Councillor Sherwood, I think we rely on town staff to suggest asset management ideas, and they'll bring that back in the 2020 budget as they see fit, and we'll again review it all, I would imagine. Councillor Taylor.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I am aligned with you as well. I would just like to make a friendly amendment, and the same thing as earlier. I'd just like to keep track of these things, and can we take the 160 and put it into the 2020 budget?
Councillor Sherwood, was that what your thoughts were? Or? Councillor Sherwood.
Actually, Your Worship, I was wondering if we could bring forth 2 of them in the 2 of the 4 in the 2020 budget, meaning the 2 that require, that they're used 12 months of the year. So I was thinking the 2 parks that are causing some winter issues. That's rather, so I don't think that would be 160,000.
Right. Okay.
But again, we can leave
So
that for 2020.
we have a motion on the floor. Okay, Mr. Brennan.
Your Worship, just maybe to help out here, One thing to remember from council is that if you're going to defer a lot of these items to 2020, 21, what you're going to end up doing is, you know, a lower, potentially a lower impact on tax levy this year, but if your intent is to push them all off into a future year, you're going to have to bite the bullet in a future year with a lot higher tax levy or impact in spending.
Right.
So that's point one. Point two, Mr. Mayor, as you said, we will bring back these items as a staff will see from an asset management, from a town safety, whatever the case may be, or from our professional opinions. What we may do then in the future years is to bring back different options, and maybe an options for 1, 2, 3, and 4, or something along those lines to give council a better decision-making tool.
Right. Excellent. Okay, well, that's kind of, I think, what we all would expect and hope to happen. So, so let's have a vote, first of all, on the motion that's on the floor right now, which is to remove that item entirely, 160. So, all in favor? Opposed? Councillor Sherwood. So that has passed. Now, Councillor Sherwood, did you want to make another motion here? Or I'm just, again, I believe that it's going to be brought back and there's going to be some options, as Mr. Brennan said. Is that sufficient, or do you want some more further clarity? No? Okay. Councillor Taylor?
Yeah, so we're clean, right? All the motions are in?
I believe so.
Okay. I'd like to make a motion then, if I could. So I think that what I'd like to do is finish off the parks. So I'd like to make a truncated motion here that we approve the following. So from B, I don't know if this is 0 or, but 602 all the way down to 1029 and finish off the parks portion. I'd like to make a motion that we approve all of those. I can't do that?
What are you looking at? Yeah.
From Dragonfly Park walkway light to Harvey Curry Park. Those 7 or 8 items.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe that's a better way. Councillor Post just said, my motion will be to approve everything that we haven't discussed in parks.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
If I
Madam
could.
Clerk. Madam Clerk.
Just to make sure we know what everybody's talking about, that would include the spectator seating, the park fencing at Kin and Idlewild, the park swing, the tablets, the lawnmower, rotary parking lot, lighting retrofit, Dragonfly Park walkway lights, safety netting for the small soccer fields, Rotary Park skateboard park lighting and poles, Mill Creek Trail Bridge, Parks Truck number 6, and Harvey Curry Park splash pad.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor to approve all of those items that Madam Clerk has just read out. Do we have a seconder for that motion? Deputy Mayor McIntosh, second. Let's have a comment discussion there, please. Councillor Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Taylor, for putting forward the motion. I would not approve it as written. I'd like to pull out the Harvey Curry renovations for a separate discussion. My point being at this stage that taking on new debt in that amount at this stage, especially some of the other savings we've realized, I think it's in our best interest to avoid as much debt as possible as a corporation and as a town. And if there's a way to reduce the debt load associated with that project over the 10-year span or whatever is proposed for it, I'd be in favor of having that discussion and seeing if we can move that forward. So 90% of the items I'm on board with, but I'd like to have a conversation specifically about that project if council would allow.
And are you suggesting that conversation tonight? You wish to have it? Yeah. Okay. All right. Councillor Andrews.
Thank you very much, Your Worship, and again, I will agree with Councillor Peters. You also brought something up, Mayor Brown, about the lawnmower. And could you provide some clarification on your view on that? Because again, before we would move to this, you did make reference to that.
You know, I've heard from the public. What?
As we're hearing the
So
public
I think calling it a lawnmower is a little bit, you know, maybe the terminology is a little, you know, I made a couple phone calls today just to talk to people about commercial lawn care equipment, and one of them was to Huron Tractor, which is a John Deere dealer. I talked to one of the reps there. Again, one of their pieces of equipment is has an 11-foot wide cut. That particular piece of equipment had some wings, which were also moors, that the person riding the cab could bring up, which would make it a sort of faceted machine that could cut small areas, large areas, was functionally. And again, that was 11-foot cut. I asked approximate cost, around $100,000, plus HST, plus extended warranty. So this type of equipment, when you're cutting big pieces of land, is of that kind of dollar amount. I just needed to clarify that for myself, and I did. So I just wanted to share that piece of information with council and with the public, because people look at, they don't, the understanding is dealing with commercial lawn care is a different thing. And again, you get thousands of hours of use out of a well-built machine. Probably we're looking at a 10-year lifespan of that machine. So we extrapolate that money over 10 years. It's a lot, but we need good equipment, and we need our staff to have good equipment. So that was my clarification on that. Councillor Taylor.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Out of respect for Councillor Peters and to his point, perhaps we should have the discussion. It won't change necessarily how I feel about Harvey Curry Park, but out of respect, I'd like to remove Harvey Curry from my motion. So my motion would be to approve all of the items that we haven't touched on, with the exception of Harvey Curry. Thank you.
Okay, and we'll have a seconder for that friendly amendment, Deputy Mayor McIntosh. Any further comment on that motion? Okay, we'll call a vote. All in favor? Unanimous. Now, Councillor Peters, would you like to start off the discussion on Harvey Curry Park, please? Thank you.
Certainly, it's a very large dollar item. It's listed here at $1 million. It includes the play structures, the splash pads, as I understand it, an expansion to the existing building with the pumps and whatnot for the splash pads. Of course, an upgrade to the systems there as recirculating, which of course I support. I actually didn't realize they weren't recirculating at the current time. So I believe all the infrastructure and upgrades that are proposed, I support. It's a very well-used park. What I'd like to do, though, and we can have the discussion now, but perhaps this is a circle-back item given the magnitude of the dollar value, but, looking at where we sit and again, speaking to Mr. Brennan's comments about delaying the inevitable, we saw the 2020 and 2021 budgets for capital almost double what they are proposed for 2019 in the order of 20 million versus 10. So, I don't necessarily support trying to get down to that zero or that negative value. If we have the chance to be in a reasonable range for the citizens, and we can really save money by reducing the long-term debt associated with some of these projects, I'd like to explore those options. So rather than include it in that motion, I just wanted to bring it forth, and maybe this, by the time we circle back to it, at the end of where we sit and we have an update from the treasurer, that sort of thing, maybe that's the best time to have the conversation, but because of the magnitude of the dollar value, I didn't want to lump it in.
Okay, so you're talking about this evening, maybe, to talk about it at the end of our discussion on capital budget items. Okay, I think that's reasonable. Councillor Taylor.
I don't believe that's a motion that requires a second. Does it require? We're just going to push it off.
Right.
I think that's very prudent to do, for sure. At the end, though, there is a safety issue here, so we'll all want to be aware of that as we go forward. But I'm in favor of moving on then, and we'll come back at the end.
Okay. Deputy Mayor McIntosh.
Just a comment, and I get this from the county. Sometimes debt isn't a bad thing because it allows the people that are going to use it in the future to be paying for it in the future instead of the people that are using, that are there now. Debt's kind of, nobody wants it, I understand that, but the people are going to be using this splash pad in 5 years. if we take out debt, they're still going to be paying for it. So it's just something to think about, but.
Right, fair enough. Councillor Taylor.
To Deputy Mayor McIntosh, I completely agree, and as we've established from conversations with staff and just realizing, we owe about $31 million today, which I know to those people sitting at home, that would sound like a lot of money. For a municipality of our size, it's actually quite reasonable. My concern is actually as we go forward in this budget process and, the capital projects that are coming at us in terms of the fire hall, Tony Rose, some improvements that are needed at Alder, Diane Drive, these things cause me great angst, and they're all going to debt at this point. So that will be my focus as we go forward, and it's quite concerning. Anyway, just wanted to pick up on your comments, so I agree.
Okay, let's move along. The next item for consideration is the HVAC repairs under recreation events. Mr. Osmond, can you just give us a quick background on those again, please?
The HVAC unit, Your Worship, the HVAC units at Alder were analyzed and assessed in 2018 by an engineer, HVAC engineer, and all these units have been there since the building was opened 15 years ago. So they're at their life cycle, and we have them on right now we have all the HVAC systems are all in play for the next 3-4 years out.
Right.
So they're in our asset management replacement scenario. And what you're seeing now is what they have been recommended for 2019.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Taylor.
I'd just like to make a motion to approve.
We have a seconder, Deputy Mayor McIntosh. We have some comment from Councillor Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I could, through you to Mr. Osmond, could you clarify whether this allocation is for repairs to existing units or replacement of units?
Your Worship, through you to Councillor Peters, some are replacement of units and some are upgrades to the existing units, depending on the actual unit and what it actually does. Some are air conditioning units and some are heating units and some are air handling units. So they're all a little different. I would have to come back. I'd have to pull the actual study itself and show you, but they're all different pieces. And going forward, some are bigger, much larger. You see out further. We're looking at units that are up to $750,000, so they're quite large to replace.
Councillor Peters.
Thank you. Just as a follow-up, we're obviously very late in the game for the 2019 replacement, and we have reports suggesting what those upgrades should be, and so I'm happy to support the motion that Councillor Taylor made, but I guess I'd just like to make the point that moving forward, the assets of the town and a large section of that is the buildings that we occupy need to be looked at from an energy perspective. There's a very old energy report done back in 2010 or maybe even earlier. Some of those things were realized, some were not. Technologies have changed quite a bit. I believe sometime in the near future we should be looking at these things again. And having read many HVAC reports over the years, the standard recommendations made by a variety of firms are, a sort of a status quo perspective, and I think investment in this area is required. But at this time, obviously, there are plans to put this in place. This is a fairly modest amount in the large scheme. I'd like to look into it further moving forward, but happy to support the motion as is.
Okay. So if I'm reading here, Mr. Peters, perhaps going forward, if town staff could provide options maybe if energy efficiency or higher efficiency units are available and that there may be a greater cost for those, that we would consider those options. Is that correct? Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Peters.
Yes, just to round that out, I imagine buildings and energy efficiency will be part of the Sustainable Neighborhood Action Plan. So perhaps that is the Kickstarter for some of these studies, but rather than be reactive and ask for quotes once we're already at the end of life cycle, I guess just in a general sense, I'd like to see more research done and forecasting done on the types of systems that serve our buildings. So I'm sure that will be the topic of many discussions moving forward. Just wanted to get that in there while I had the chance.
Great. I like where you're going with that. Thank you. Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. No further comments. on approving the $75,000 expenditure for HVAC. I'm going to call the vote. All in favor? Yeah, unanimous. Thank you. Moving on to facilities, we have a number of items here that have already been approved, but the ones that haven't include floor scrubber, 2 floor scrubbers, one for Alder Arena, one for Tony Rose, Alder parking lot study and redesign, the Orangeville, I guess that's the OSPCA is the, okay, the roof, yeah, there, and air handling and HVAC upgrades as well at OSPCA. Theater main public counter, town hall wayfinding signage, power floor sweeper for Tony Rose, a portable pool vacuum for Alder, portable pool vacuum for Tony Rose, interior wayfinding signage, I'm not sure which building that's for, but maybe we can find out. Security cameras at Alder, council chamber tables and chairs, infrastructure services rehabilitation, LED lighting, second floor town hall, elevator and front desk reconstruction, Novatime hand scanners, sound system for second floor, multi-purpose room, fire alarm panel for town hall, and digital flat screen display and TV software. Do we have a motion or do we have some comment? Okay, Deputy Mayor McIntosh, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, I know there's been some questions raised about the theater main public corridor, and I see we have Mr. Nairn here. I just wondered if he would like to comment on, is this a need or a want, or can he explain exactly what we're looking for?
Through your worship to Deputy McIntosh. As council is aware, we manage the facility for the town of Orangeville. These are all recommendations that have come forth from that management. Thank you. From that management group in consultation with staff. This counter in particular is something that we were made aware by staff that in order to meet the town's accessibility policy and practices, that's what the main work is out there. There's also, I think, some safety issues around the front door. I just wanted council to understand that perhaps it's best sometimes to think of these things as opera house improvement. The facility upstairs is known as the Orangeville Town Hall Opera House, so that any time that these improvements are made to the facility, sometimes the perception is that they are made to the benefit or for Theater Orangeville. Theater Orangeville is, of course, one of the users of the space, but any improvement that we bring up there is to a town facility and is an asset, and the concern is about town policy and town procedure as sometimes guided by staff. And in the specific instance of the counter, that's what's happening out there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Andrews.
Thank you very much, through you, Mayor Brown, to Mr. Osmond. And I do have 3 questions that are pertaining to some of the lined item here. And I also wanted to make a couple of comments too as well. But if you could provide some clarification briefly to the members of council on the proposed parking lot study and the redesign. Being a frequent user of that particular location for a variety of purposes, including hockey and other professional reasons, it has certainly become a very crowded and sometimes very difficult area to navigate. And if you could provide maybe some clarity to members of council on what the intent of that particular study would be, that would be certainly appreciated.
Your Worship, through to Councillor Andrews, you alluded to it, the starting off, Councillor Andrews. First of all, our high volumes of traffic in our parking lot at Alder is surpassed our peak. The parking lot right now is used to capacity on many occasions throughout the year. We have a couple of issues. First of all, the access to Alder from Alder itself is problematic. It's congested. It's congested down Alder from time on many occasions. Only one access, the access off of Alder into the entranceway, the entrance to Alder, is problematic for people. We have issues with the public coming in, dropping people off, stopping in the actual laneway coming in. We have no access off Riddell Road. When the building was originally constructed, there was a question mark on the access from Riddell Road. We'd like to revisit that so that we can get access further up to the, if you would, the northwest corner as a possibility. We also like to reconfigure the actual parking area right off of the main entrance so that persons with mobility issues don't have to walk so far to get to the front entrance. That's a problem as well. The stopping and parking in the actual, I'll call it the fire lane way, is difficult. We have a no stopping area, but it's hard to police. I think if we reconfigured the actual parking lot so people wouldn't be stopping right in front of the building, it would help, it would alleviate some of the problems we have with traffic back onto Alder. And if we really revisit people coming into the parking lot and leave the parking lot coming off of Riddell Road, it would be a great improvement for us in the parking lot itself. The uses we have at Alder right now, the program uses are expanding with the college there and all the hours they're there. They're expanding their hours into evening hours. Which would be problematic when we get into large events in our building in the evenings. We're going to have a conflict with different users. And we're also looking at down the road, if our programs continue to grow and the uses continue to grow, we would have to expand our parking lot. Again, we need to revisit how do we do that? What's the best way for us? What's the optimal way for us to use or expand that parking lot? And I think one of the best things we need to do is look at our access. From not just Alder, but also from Riddell Road, if it's any way possible to do that. Things have changed on Riddell Road, as you know, commercial-wise and so on, and we may have an opportunity to revisit it so we can get in as a in and out only off of Riddell Road, so that you come in right turn only, in, right turn out, as an option. And what if you know the area I'm alluding to is the area that's actually referring to is the area that's right next to the BMX bike park area, just to the south of that.
And just to follow up, Mr. Osman, regarding projected costs, I know that we would have to wait till a report obviously would come forth. But is there a thought also to take a look at maybe some controlled parking structure of some sort, or a gate system, or a revenue opportunity too as well? Or is that hasn't even been discussed, or is this maybe part of a potential report that could come back?
Your worship, through to Councillor Andrews, I'm always open for enterprise model. Yes, we definitely look at the control. If there's a proper control gate can go in for certain parts of that parking lot, it's something we need to look at. If we're going to pay people, ask people to pay to use a parking lot, that's a different matter altogether. Okay. Certainly something we have to come back for a different direction because we haven't done that in the community.
Okay, I've got two other questions. May I proceed? Thank you. Pertaining to the security cameras, could you please maybe just provide some clarity to also members of council on the situation there?
Your worship, through to Councillor Andrews, the security cameras we have in place at Alder have been there since day one. They're 15 years old. The picture they're giving us are very, very low quality. We have issues on the parking lot from time to time, and when we interface with the police community and trying to identify things that are going on in the parking lot, it's very difficult to use our cameras. And the cameras are from the technology right now. The cameras freeze up, and we don't get to see what happened. The cameras are really old technology, and the technology we're looking for is enhanced, so we can cover that parking lot in a greater view, if you would, and more close up in terms of what's coming into the parking lot. As an example, one of the things we can't do is we can't pick up the license plate number when you're coming into the parking lot, which is great for us to identify people coming in and going out if we have to investigate a situation. And we also have issues where we have, in the wintertime, not unlike what's happening in the street world, we have issues with slips and falls, and it's good to have things on camera if we have to protect us from an insurance perspective.
Okay, and I do have one more question, Mayor Brown, if I may continue.
Yes, sir.
This is pertaining to the digital flat screen display. I know that we did have somewhat of a general overview regarding the website and the ability to provide some information departmentally to our constituents in the community. But has there been an investigation to take a look at an alternative way of providing some of those digital displays? We do have some third-party companies that will end up doing so. I use the hospital as an example. And I'm not sure if you've had the opportunity of being in the emergency room, but I have. But you have an opportunity where there's a third-party company that will, in fact, install, provide support, and usually it is at very low cost or no cost to the facility.
Your worship, through Councillor Andrews, no, I have not investigated a commercial or if you would, a collaborative effort with a corporate venture. The equipment we're looking at now is, you touched on it, the equipment we're looking at now, the smart TV, if you would, is designed to interface with our website and with the programming in the building, so we can advise people, you know, where things are scheduled and what dressing room you're in and all these kinds of things. But the part that that we like to do that we're not doing right now is using those TVs for advertising ourselves. So that rather than have an independent come in and actually do the advertising and make the money off it, we like to do that ourselves. As an example, we've generated from an advertising, we've more than doubled our advertising revenue over the last couple of years by going out and getting companies to advertise in our building, on our doors, or wherever we can actually sell an ad. Likewise, we like to do that on TVs if we can, or on our flat screens. Right now, we don't have the capacity to do that.
So that would necessitate, an allocation of staff or someone that would be assigned to that to, be an ad sales rep and subsequently generate some additional revenue, if I'm correct in saying so?
That's correct, Councillor. We would do that. Right now, we're doing that with our staff in-house and with lots of success, so we would continue to do that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Deputy Mayor McIntosh.
Thank you, Worship. Again, in this era of needs compared to wants, I ask again, the town hall wayfinding signage. First of all, do we really need that? What is it? I see all these new signs going up in town. There's so many signs where I'm getting confused driving around town now, but there just seems to be a lot of signs, and I just wondered if we need to stop with the signs, but I'll throw it over to you.
Your Worship, through to Deputy Mayor McIntosh, the signage that we're looking at in the building is part of our branding, if you would, as a community. So people come into this building so they know where they pay their taxes, or where they go upstairs to infrastructure services, where these meeting rooms are, and the things, what's down the basement, what's upstairs, where our washrooms are, coming out of the Opera House upstairs, trying to find your way to the washrooms and so on. And some of the signage coming out of the Opera House, inside of the Opera House, finding access to what's outside, where the washrooms are, and that kind of thing. So it's not a lot of wayfinding for that kind of money. It's just quality wayfinding signage so people can find their way around this building. It's a very community-minded building. It's not just being used for council and for our staff. We have a lot of people coming to this building on weekends and evenings, and with some of the older adults as well. They're concerned about finding their services. And this way, we give them a better idea through wayfinding.
Just to follow up, I have no issue with the interior ones, because there's two items listed here. There's the interior wayfinding signage for $9,000, and the outside, I believe, would be the $7,500. I have no issue with the indoor one. I just wondered what the other one was.
$7,500 there, town hall wayfinding, is that?
No, there's an interior one on the next page.
Yeah, BO 908.1200, interior wayfinding signage, is that strictly for town hall?
That's correct, Your Worship.
9,000. So the $7,500 item, is that exterior, or? That's,
Through Your Worship, that was the one I was concerned with.
1000, yeah. Oh. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so we have some clarification here from Councillor Sherwood. The $9,000 is for Alder Street interior wayfinding, and the $7,500 is for Town Hall interior wayfinding. Is that correct? Okay.
Correct.
Okay. I've got one more question, Mr. Osmond, if you could indulge me. The digital flat screen display TV and software, which facilities are they going into?
Your Worship, they'll be going to Alder and Tony Rose.
So the existing screens now are they not functioning, or this is an upgrade required?
They're not functioning as well as we'd like in terms of integrating with our software that we have now. We can't use our Perfect Minds as an example, can't be used on our existing TVs or flat screens. And the technology we're looking at putting in for our website and so on won't interface with those TVs. So this is update to bring the TVs along with our system.
Okay, and you'll feed the information through our town staff, our IT department will feed them. Is that correct?
Your worship, our IT department controls everything we do in our overall structure departmentally, so yes.
Okay. All right. I believe we had a motion, did we not, on this? We haven't had a motion yet, okay. All right, so does somebody want to make a motion here on all of the items under facilities? Is there any exceptions here? Councillor Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Not to throw a wrinkle into it, but 2 points. One is that the basement renovation that you wanted to bring back would technically be under facilities.
Right.
And second, whether or not it makes sense within the broader motion or not, since we are speaking facilities, right now there are lighting upgrades proposed for Alder scheduled for 2020. I'd like to move those forward to 2019 to realize those savings sooner than later, especially given some of the other efficiencies we found this evening.
Okay. And Councillor Peters, what was the amount of the budget ask in 100,000? Okay. And that's for exterior lighting at Alder? Interior lighting, sorry. Mr. Osmond.
Your worship, that's all interior lighting for the pool. Everything that's, one arena is not done, and the rest will be, the whole building itself would be all LED. Just as an update, did discuss this with Orangeville Hydro, and they would definitely look at this as a potential for a grant to offset some of that cost. But we can't say the number, so we had to ask for the total number.
Right. Okay. Councillor Taylor.
So is that a motion then, or? No, just a thought process, okay. So my other concern would be the theater main public counter. And I guess it's a question to you, Mr. Jones, I think. Is it possible to move forward without the counter, however, address the other issue, sorry, Mr. Osmond, address the other issue, which is the archway and whatnot?
Your worship, through to Councillor Taylor, we could redesign the front counter to first of all take care of our first priority, which would be the accessibility piece for mobility issues and for wheelchair access. And we could do the archway as a separate piece beyond the front section of the counter. Number-wise, I couldn't say what that number would be at this point. If we were to go with 50% of it, we could do 50% and look at the other piece later on in another year. But our first priority right now, what we've done in the community is made a really, really big effort in making everything accessible to AODA standards. And in this case, even in this chamber, what we tried to do is bring everything down to the same level, so everybody's sitting at the same level, accessibility-wise. So that's the whole idea throughout the whole corporation, is to make everything as accessible as possible. And the front-end counter coming into the Opera House, it's very small and very limited, so we need to bring it all down so a person can wheel into the entrance. The reason why we included the archways, we think we can open the whole thing up and clean it up and do the whole archway and do the whole entrance at the same time. Reception, sorry.
Okay, so accessibility is not only for patrons, but also for staff that might be working behind the counter. Is that right? But there's steps outside, so accessibility is an issue just getting into that entrance, right?
You're correct, Your Worship. The building, of course, is the heritage structure, so the way it was designed, when people access this building now with mobility issues, particularly in wheelchairs, they come in through the front entrance of Town Hall, which is in fact the rear entrance of the Opera House when they're in use.
Right.
So that's just it's something we're definitely going to look at in the future. Right now, we're looking at we can accommodate our need by doing it the way we're doing it at this point. And the front entrance, in terms of getting access off, if you would, off of Broadway, is something we need to take a look at. It's a much bigger job, project.
Deputy Mayor McIntosh.
Yes, I have no issue bringing items forward from next year. Let's just keep in mind, we need to find 225,000 in savings to keep our tax levy at 0.71. The 175. And then the 50,000 we added for the fiber. So we need to find that money. But again, I have no issue bringing stuff forward, but let's just keep in mind, we've got to get that savings.
Councillor Taylor.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Mr. Osmond, for your explanation. I guess as a theater goer here, I want the facility to be as nice as possible. I just intuitively, the $60,000 for a counter feels extravagant to me. I don't have any other comment on that other than, hey, I'd love to go to an accessible counter, and I'd love to give Theatre Orangeville hundreds of thousands of dollars if I could. The reality is, it just doesn't feel good to me. So I'm not sure if I have a motion. I'd just like to throw it out to council that, do we want a $60,000 countertop? It feels like, you know, front page of the Banner News that we've spent that much money on on a countertop. So something to consider.
Right. Councillor Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My comment is just more in a general sense. The more we stage these things, the more potentially they'll cost, the more disruption there is. So the thinking behind bringing the lighting forward, for example, we could tie it into the town hall lighting under a single contract, perhaps. You know, to Councillor Taylor's point, if the counter is 1 year later, but we're working on the archway, again, you know, people, patrons, staff, people using this facility would optimally, you know, would like to minimize the amount of construction done on the facility. If this is something we're going to implement at some point, you know, we should really decide whether we're in now or we're in later, but splitting it up and spreading those costs over several years may not give us the result we're looking for from a usability perspective or necessarily cost efficiency.
Right, and following on Councillor Taylor's thoughts about the theatre counter, we still have a basement renovation that it sounds like, you know, making accommodation for additional staff to continue to improve our services to our community is something that town staff is requesting. So again, as we go through the line items in facilities, I think we need to bring that back, or at least a portion of that back, for consideration now. Councillor Sherwood.
Yeah, I was just going to bring back, Your Worship, about the basement renovation. I think I made my point kind of clear earlier that I don't support necessarily the showers and the lunchroom. I think that's a nice little want for the sake of 30 or 40 staff members compared to the 400 staff that are on the payroll. I can't see an outside staff person running over here to get a shower, so or to sit and have their lunch. So I respect that we need to conduct business, and maybe it would be a good spot for, you know, IT equipment and other office part of it. But I'd like to kind of pull a little bit away from that and not give the 75,000. Like, I'd like to approve parts of it, not all of it. So can we pull that out in our overall approval here? And going back to
Okay, Mr. Brennan, would you like to comment?
Yeah, Your Worship, I know there's been some talk about the up and down and finding the extra monies for the 50,000. I just want to advise council, right now with the takeaways, the minuses and pluses, the 50,000 in, and some of the removals from the proposed or the recommended budget, we are presently at negative 0.06 on the tax levy, just to let you know where we're at.
Okay, very good. Okay, so, Councillor Post, I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, we're talking about the town hall basement renovation. My thought process for removing it, when I'm looking at the justification from the town, it's not speaking to additional office space or anything like that. It is speaking primarily and solely, actually, to it being staff change rooms, proper lunch area, and really just a renovation down there for showers and that kind of thing. So if we could get clarification on what that office space would look like, because you've mentioned office space, but in the justification for it, it doesn't speak to that. If we need it for accommodating town staff, I think that's extremely important, and I would definitely be willing to reconsider that portion of it. But I echo what Councillor Sherwood has said, that bringing it back primarily just for having staff change rooms and area like that, I'm not in support of. But if we do need the office space, then that's definitely something I'm willing to reconsider.
Councillor Sherwood.
Yes, Your Worship. Thank you, Councillor Post, for basically reiterating what my point is. So if I could ask Mr. Brennan, does he have any idea how much the cost would change in the basement renovation if we look after the office renovation?
Mr. Brennan.
Your Worship, through you. I just had this discussion with Mr. Osmond during the break, or change of the chair, and we're estimating probably 20 or 25,000. We would be able to get the required office space and cubicles down there. We would be going with cubicles. Of course, with that, we'll probably have to do some data, some fiber or some communication lines and such, but probably around the 25,000 range. The only other things that we're looking at down there actually was a storage area, so that's just a couple walls so that we can put our janitorial and our facility staff in there, and some storage that we desperately need. We were also looking at a lunchroom, and though as you say, is maybe only 30 or 40 staff, we would like to have a proper lunchroom per se, and I think we put forth the idea why we're recommending a shower, or 2 small showers for staff that are working long hours, try to enhance or encourage active lifestyles of being to get out at lunchtime for a walk, or people walking or biking to work, reduce carbon footprints and everything else that we want to throw at that. However, if council is not willing to fund the showers, I certainly would ask if you would reconsider, and we'll need the office space. We certainly need it, so if you consider that amount at least.
Councillor Sherwood.
Yes, Your Worship. So if my fellow councillors are willing to agree, I would like to change that to $35,000 to allow adequate office space down there.
All right.
So if I could put
I would
motion-
second that.
If I could put a motion in for that, to change that to $35,000 for office.
We're going to have comment now. Councillor Peters. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess my comments on this are that, while we're not, proposing the town hall turn into the Google office with arcades and everything like that, I think it's important for people that work full-time for the town to have those things that make their workday more enjoyable and more palatable. It can be a grinding atmosphere, whether you're working for a municipality or any other business or corporation. And, I think the level of amenities perhaps doesn't have to extend as far as the showers, but certainly a place to have a break, eat your lunch, meet with other staffers, have sort of that place away from your desk is important. Not to split this thing up too much, but I wonder if there's a way to not look at the plumbing aspects, which are perhaps some of the more costly, but to keep some of that amenity space there while we have the chance, again, to avoid coming back in a couple of years when that demand from staff grows and grows. We're squeezing more and more people into this building. They need some space to spread out.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I guess my concern is I'm very cognizant of staff. I respect staff. I want the building to be useful. I want people to feel like they're contributing members. My concern is I think about Diane Drive again. I think about what are we going to do over at Tony Rose. And I'd like to have some sort of thought process in place and something drawn out for me where I would see what our plan is for people and building space and whatnot over time. And I recognize this is not to be flippant to the taxpayers who are watching, but I recognize it's not a lot of money. It's $25,000, and it would be a stopgap solution. It just, I'd feel better if we knew what that plan was, and I know we're not going to know what that plan is for a period of time, but there's so many questions about our facilities. It bothers me to do this,
Right.
not knowing the rest of the story, right?
Right, and, you know, we're sitting in this beautiful new chambers here where there's been, you know, $400,000 to $500,000 spent in the last few months. Again, I appreciate what the previous council decision was. This is functional and a legacy for many years to come, so, but, you know, the taxpayers wondering about continual spending money in town hall, but it's, yeah, it's a challenge, so. Councillor Sherwood.
Yes, so I just wanted to add back that, yes, obviously the comfort of the employees is very important, but we have an absolutely beautiful park in the back here that I wouldn't hesitate in a minute to take my lunch and go sit and enjoy the nice weather, not in this particular day, but I'm just saying there are opportunities as well. It's not like you're stranded in this building and you're not able to leave and that you're committed to going to a lunchroom. So that, and my thought with the 25,000 that Mr. Brennan suggested could do some offices, I gave that little 10,000 as a bit of a cushion there to maybe help, you know, make it a little aesthetically more pleasing down there for staff to have their lunch.
Very good. Councillor Post.
My question would be for Mr. Osmond or Mr. Brennan, whoever could answer it. Taking into consideration the comments from Councillor Peters, I agree. Now, with the 35,000 that Councillor Sherwood has suggested, is that going to be enough to take care of the office space as well as potentially some upgrades to the lunchroom and making that a better usable space? Or what would that number look like if we were simply taking out the change rooms and the showers?
Mr. Brennan.
Your Worship, through you to Councillor Post and maybe Sherwood, I think we can make that work. And I think what we will do when we look at the design is potentially set it up so that if there is a requirement in the future, or if this council or other councils have a change of heart, that we will have a space to put washrooms or a shower.
Okay. I think I guess we'll call a vote on your motion to reduce that particular item from 75,000 to 35,000. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Taylor is opposed. Okay. Now, we had comment on the theater counter. Any further comment on that, Councillor Taylor? No motion? Okay. I guess we're at the point now where we should probably have a motion on a collective here on these items. Councillor Taylor.
I think I'm getting wishy-washy as the evening goes on. I started off so strong, but I honestly don't know what to do about that counter. It just doesn't feel good to me. I feel like we could do a mass submission here and approve a bunch of things, but I'm not sure we have clarity on the counter. Does council want to spend that on a counter? Is that the right thing to do?
It's wasn't on my, top priority list, but I think there's the accessibility issue, accessibility for the staff that mans that is something that needs to be considered, and I think it's going to be inevitable. I'm just wondering if we can, again, maybe defer that until the fall for consideration again and get a little more clarity on. Again, there's, issues on accessibility to the building, talk about, downtown revitalization, about Broadway and other things, and it might be worth, again, waiting for some other things to happen on that front to tackle this. My personal opinion. Councillor Sherwood.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I echo Councillor Taylor's thoughts on initially trying to swallow the $60,000. Believe me, I love nothing more than our opera house, and I'm very proud of that. However, I I go back to this, is it a want or is a need? Now, the word accessibility has been coming up many times in this discussion. And I really want to have clarification when we say accessibility. Who has determined there's been an accessibility issue? Is it just staff, or is it workers, or it's just an observation? Or has somebody from an accessibility committee actually deemed them to be actual accessibility issues? Because we can keep talking about accessibility, and I can say that I have accessibility issues getting through here. I want to know specifically who made that predetermination that there was accessibility issues.
Mr. Osmond?
Your worship, through to Councillor Sherwood, staff do an assessment on all of our buildings on a regular basis. This particular chamber you're sitting in has been redesigned to make sure it reaches or meets AODA standards, as is every other door in this building. Push buttons is an example, so the doors open up by pushing the door, so the push button so the door opens automatically, those kinds of things. Likewise, our counters that we're working on would be designed to OADA standards. If you take a look as an example, if you go up to Alder Recreation Center and you walk into the front desk, that's typically what you're looking at doing here. So that the wheelchair, when a wheelchair comes in as an example and wheels up where I'm sitting right now, that person can sit here just like this in a wheelchair in that front counter. That can't happen right now. It also can't happen for the person that's sitting in the space behind. It has to be designed for that person to serve the other person across the counter. One of the reasons why we're looking at $60,000 is we're having a lot of difficulty getting a price from mill workers in the environment, and we liked it nothing better than have a price come in a lot lower. Unfortunately, our experience has been we're getting high prices particularly on mill work. And this is why we're looking at it in the marketplace and saying we need to allow enough so that we don't go into the marketplace and find ourselves not enough money, so we have to come back and find more money to do the particular project. In this case, it's a little bit more complicated because we're trying to do it so that we're working in a staircase area, we're working in the entrance we have, we're working with a structure, a whole structure where the archway is, and we can clean all that up and make the old area accessible right around the entire reception area versus one small section. If we were looking at it from one, just to be very specific with the AODA standard and deal just with one section, we could take the project and revamp the whole project. We would have to do that. If you want to take it down from $60,000 and revisit that way, then we can go back and go very specific with just one piece of the counter. We want to do the whole thing. It would be our preference. But if you want to do one section, to create one section for mobility issues, it may be another way of looking at it. What we typically do is we go into the environment and we like to do the old environment and complete it. To revisit it over and over would be not the way we would prefer to do it.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor.
So I'd like to make a motion, and my motion would be that I would like to approve all of the items in the facilities section in section 380 for the items that we have not covered off. So maybe the clerk can help me, but we have covered off
Town hall window and door
town hall
replacement.
renovations,
Theater flooring.
theater flooring, that's it. Everything else would have to be.
Town hall second floor flooring replacement was already previously
Was already covered, yeah.
We talked about windows
Yeah.
and doors, yeah. So,
So it's
and-
clarity, including the counter. So
Yeah,
I
and-
would push that we would approve everything in the 380 facility section that we haven't already spoken to,
including a theater counter.
including the theater counter.
Including the
I don't
theater
hear great disagreement to it, so I think we need to get this thing moving.
Madam Clerk.
The infrastructure services rehabilitation for $70,000 was also approved earlier.
Right, and we've reduced the town hall basement renovation to 35,000 from
Yes.
75,000. Okay, so we have a motion on the floor to approve everything other than pardon me? Yeah, we've got a motion. We haven't had a seconder yet. Okay, let's go with Councillor Andrews as a seconder. Any further comment on this motion? We'll call the vote. I'm sorry, Mr. Osmond.
Your worship, could I get clarity, excuse me, clarity from Councillor Peters, the $100,000 to, was there a motion, if I might have missed it, $100,000 to move to lighting for Alder ahead from 2020 to 2019?
Not included it.
Okay.
Councillor Peters. Sorry, hang on. We got a glitch here. Yeah. We got a glitch. Sorry. Turn it off again. Okay. The bewitching hour is hit. Dan, I don't know. Can you give us a hand here? You hit your button? Okay. He wants to go to bed. Okay, so we have a motion on the floor, notwithstanding that which we can deal with after. So I'm going to call the vote on the motion, excluding the lighting upgrade, but including everything here. So all in favor? Unanimous? Okay, so we've approved all of those items under facility, including the theater upgrade. Now, I just wondering about, so just a quick comment here on continuing, or do we wish to adjourn, council members? What are your thoughts? Well, we can go with hands up again, and I can hopefully record them. Right, so we don't have audio. Right. Mr. Brennan.
Your worship, maybe take a recess until we can figure out what's going
Maybe
on, and then
reboot
come
the
back.
system, maybe, yeah. Yes, let's take a 5-minute recess, please. Thank you. Shall we reconvene our meeting? So, I'll let Councillor Peters talk here. Go right ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just the point I was going to make right there before the break and the malfunction there was that my support of the motion under the facilities, I am behind, but I'd like to bring up that point again about the Alder Street lighting and whether or not this is the correct time to do so while we're talking facilities, or whether we get the number at the end of the night and rediscuss. I'll leave to you, but I won't be leaving without.
I think it's fine now. Let's talk about it now. Sure.
Okay, then I would move that the 100,000 allocated to the Alder Street lighting improvements be moved from 2020 to 2019.
Okay. Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Taylor. Councillor Sherwood.
Yes, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Brennan and staff, can you tell us what effect that will give us on the tax rate if we put the 100,000 back in? Where we're running right now with the tally, I'd like to know what's that change is that going to make for us?
Your Worship, through you, we're just going to run the number on our tally sheet here, and so if we add an additional 100,000,
Can you show the tally sheet on the display, please?
we will bring the tally sheet up to so inclusive of the $175,000 that we took away from transfer to capital yesterday. If we bring on the $100,000, we will be at right now magic happening, maybe not, but it's at 0.83%. If we can bring that up so that residents at home can see it. Yeah, 0.83%.
And if we remove it?
It was negative, was it not? Or not? No,
I don't
I'm
see.
sorry,
I don't see the 100,000 on there.
No, not 100,000 being removed. We want to add 100,000. So, Your Worship, again, through you to Councillor Sherwood, if you remove the 100,000, we'll be at 0.54 of a percent.
But we're adding. Is
I
that
just
not the
wanted to know.
question?
I wanted to see what the rate was without the 100,000 and what it would be.
0.54 and 0.83 with it. Is that what you're saying?
Your Worship, that is correct.
Okay. Fair enough. And also, point of clarity, I believe that Mr. Osmond said that there may be some grant monies possible for lighting efficiency upgrades. And we'll be exploring those. Correct, Mr.
That's
Osmond?
correct, Your Worship. The lighting that we've done in the last couple of years, we've been successful in getting funding through the Orangeville Hydro, and we would likewise go after funding for all of our projects with lighting in all the buildings. We have that discussion up to this point, but we'd need to make application, of course, and see what happens.
Great. I know a guy on the board, though, in case you know. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was just having a sidebar with Councillor Post, and on that sheet, we didn't see the minus 160 for the parking lots. Was that there as a thought? And then I do have, that wasn't really what I wanted to chat about, but.
Okay. It has been taken into consideration, your tally sheet?
Okay.
You're correct. It has been removed, Your Worship.
Okay.
Okay, and then through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Peters, I wish that we could just leave these deferral items for just a bit longer. I'd love to get through the agenda, and then there's Arthur Curry and your motion for the lights, and I just love to get through this whole thing, see where we're at, and then come back, and then I think I'd be more supportive if I had a better view of where we're going to end up, as opposed to doing it now.
Councilors? Okay, so let's go to Councilor Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'm happy to delay the vote if you like, but sort of as a point of clarity, and all due respect to Councilor Sherwood, I brought this motion forward because I believe it is well-timed. It's the prudent thing to do in tying with other renovations that are happening in improving the energy efficiency of our facilities moving forward. This was not to hit a target number. I don't believe we should be looking at these items as hitting 0 or 1% or 1.5% or whatever that number is. We should be looking at these items based on their validity and their timing, coupled with the expense that staff have allocated for them. And that was the reasoning behind the motion.
Right. Deputy Mayor McIntosh.
Yeah, so a quick question. The word grants was used. If we are going to get a grant for this, a good possibility, would that lower the cost at all? Like, could we go with 50,000 instead of 100,000? Through you, Your Worship.
Mr. Osmond.
Your Worship, what we normally do is we would actually put in our full fund, and if we get funding after that, we would definitely, it would go back into the, into your surplus, if you would. And right now, we're saying it's $100,000 to do all the lights. And if we get a grant, then we would decrease our ask and go back into surplus.
Okay. And second of all, I kind of disagree with Councillor Peters. I think we need to hit a target number, and I think it needs to be a low number. The citizens of this town have been taxed to death for the last few years, and I think it's time it stopped. And, you know, a 0.5, a 0.7, I think is fair and reasonable. Just my comments, but I think we need to hit a number of some type.
Okay, so just to recap, Madam Clerk, did we have a motion on the 100,000? We're gonna delay it. We don't have a motion on the floor. Okay. No. Okay. Councillor Taylor?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I feel like this seems to be my realm already as a councillor, but I feel like items 1, 2, 3, and 4 in the Public Works will require minimum to no discussion. So I'd like to move that we pass those 4 items now. And that's street lights, traffic signal upgrades, Emerald Ash Borer, and the noise fence.
Councillor Peters.
Thank you. Through you to Councillor Taylor. Just curious why the transportation projects was left off your list, unless you have a specific concern about that item.
Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, through you, Your Worship. I was just anticipating that we'd have some discussion, so I'm trying to expedite things at 20 after 10, and that was it. Sorry, okay. Councillor Peters.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. Does anyone want to second that? Okay, Councillor Peters. Any further discussion on approval of those first 4 items in the Public Works ask? No comments? Hold on. I'm sorry, Councillor Andrews.
Great, thank you very much, Your Worship. I just was looking for further clarification, and I don't want to prolong this, but I thought that, you know, understanding the noise fence, and would this be with Mr. Jones? Could you just provide just a little bit more clarification to members of council? And you don't have to take too much time, but, you know, having read the information, I'm just trying to get a handle of it, on the necessity of it.
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Andrews. Essentially, there are in places in town along Riddell Road, out along Highway 9, Highway 10, there are areas where there is noise fence that were required when the subdivisions were originally built. The original noise fence was built of wood. It had a limited lifespan, and it's reached its life expectancy. We've had some windstorms in recent years that have taken down large sections of noise fence, which then have had to been repaired under emergency situations. A couple of years ago, we changed our standard, and now we're building composite fences, which have a much longer life expectancy and require somewhat less maintenance. And we have been moving through replacing noise fence that's reached its expected life expectancy in stages in a program where we're allocating roughly the same amount on an annual basis so that we can move through and replace that noise fence that has reached its lifespan.
So correct me if I'm wrong, it would be replaced with a composite product, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, I guess we'll call a vote on that. All in favor? unanimously approved. That's the top 4 items on the Public Works list. So going on to transportation projects, Councillor Taylor.
I'm sorry, Your Worship. Are you going to go in order now? Is that what we're going to do, or are we still okay to jump around a little bit?
Okay. I'm open to your...
Okay, in the spirit of trying to get some things taken care of here, I've read the reports in detail on both the Dawson Bridge rehabilitation and the Drive Bridge rehabilitation, and I would like to go forward with the recommendations made by Mr. Jones and his team and put those both for consideration in this budget.
Okay. Can we have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Andrews. Any further discussion on those 2 items, the Tideman and Dawson Road Bridge rehabilitations? We'll call a vote. All in favor? Those items have been approved. Thank you. Do we want to go back to transportation projects? Councillor Taylor. No. Okay, fair enough. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'd like to, if I could, move on to the retaining wall on Blind Line. Drive by there frequently, as many people in Orangeville do. I look at that wall and just kind of catch the corner of my eye. And then when I saw this, I thought, why are we doing this? And then I actually did walk up to it and see, and the pictures provided by town staff, it does require some maintenance of sorts. I guess my question to you, Mr. Jones, or through you, Your Worship, to Mr. Jones, would be there is an assessment and then there's the work that needs to be done. And I'm just wondering if you could kind of describe that financially to us and what the steps would be and the timelines, and, you know, do we need to do the whole thing, or how would it go?
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Taylor. As you've characterized it, yes, we would be hiring a consultant to move forward with an assessment of the wall itself to determine whether some maintenance is required or whether we would be looking at a complete replacement. The challenge is it would be difficult to replace a part of that wall. Certainly aesthetically it would not tie in very well, and ultimately we aren't going to know until the assessment's done what the total cost of this is going to be. Staff have made an effort to come up with that cost estimate because there are concerns that once the assessment's done that we will need to move forward expeditiously with the replacement.
Councillor Taylor.
So that's what I thought you would say, so thank you for your clarification. I would like to put that one forward as well as a motion for approval and as part of this budget.
Councillor Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd second the motion, and just to add commentary to that, I think we've seen, based on the earlier discussions about allocation from previous years, you know, staff have found ways to come under budget. If the report comes back with something with a lower value that suits the needs of the wall and department, you know, I trust Mr. Jones and his team would do that. So, you know, I don't think this is necessarily locked in, but I think the value should be there in case of, you know, impending disaster in that location. So I'll second it.
Any further comment? Call a vote. All in favor? Okay, unanimously approved. That's the retaining wall assessment and rehabilitation for Blind Line. Okay. Councillor Sherwood.
Yes, Your Worship, thank you. I'd like to put a motion on, if I could please, for approval of Faulkner Street reconstruction, Gifford Street reconstruction, and Little York Street reconstruction from John East to parking lot.
Yeah, they were
sorry.
approved earlier. Okay. Okay, so again, back to the top of the list. Let's go with Councillor Peters.
Sure. Looking for another, perhaps a quick one, given the hour and sort of our progress so far. But the The items under wastewater, so there are 4 items left there that we haven't talked about, I believe. The Clarifier 3 center unit replacement, the SCADA server replacements, the Mixer 6 replacements, and the sodium bisulfite analyzer and pumps replacements. I'd like to move those in combination, given that those are critical infrastructure systems for the town.
Deputy Mayor McIntosh seconding that motion. Any further comment on those 4 items? Okay. Call a vote. All in favor? Unanimously approved, the 4 remaining items there on wastewater. Okay. So shall we go back to Public Works here? This transportation projects issue. Any comment there? Councillor Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would move that it be approved. It's my understanding that is anticipation of projects, and as it relates to the timing of events and optimizing the tender prices of various construction projects around town. So that is money that will make its way into the infrastructure projects at one point or another, but it's done to get a better price and make sure the flow of construction throughout town is as efficient as possible. So I would move that.
Seconded by Councillor Post. Any further comment on that motion? Okay, I'll call a vote. All in favor? Unanimously approved. That's the transportation projects item. So now we have some equipment replacements, truck 15 and street power sweeper replacement. Councillor Taylor?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I wonder, I stayed away from these things deliberately as I thought there would be some discussion. They're all big bills. I'm wondering if we could get Mr. Jones to speak to them a little bit more and just give some clarity on you know, the reasons for replacement and whatnot. I know they're aged. That being said, it wouldn't be my area of expertise in terms of that type of equipment. It's just, those are big budget items between the 3 of them, and I'm just wondering if we could maybe have a little report on the 3.
Mr. Jones?
Your Worship, through you to Councillor Taylor, I believe when you, speaking of the 3, you're talking about the truck 15 replacement, the sweeper replacement, and the loader replacement. Truck 15, it's a 2008 model pickup truck. It's 11 years old, and it's a truck that's worked hard over the years. Our maintenance costs are increasing on that truck. Certainly, we try and get as much out of trucks as we can, but it reaches a point where you're throwing good money after bad, and we've reached that point with truck 15. As it relates to the sweeper, that's perhaps even more so. That sweeper has unfortunately been a bit of a maintenance headache for us. Parts have been difficult to get. The sweeper has been out of service for prolonged periods of time as a result of that, and it is time to replace it. The loader that we're replacing, actually, we're funding that from the Winter Control Reserve. By way of explanation, there is a bunch of codes in the operating budget that relate to dealing with a severe winter, and we try and take a 5-year average on those costs. And when we have a bad winter, we've got money that we can draw from that reserve, so we don't drive the overall budget into deficit, because these can be some big dollar amounts. When there's surpluses, it gets transferred into the Winter Control Reserve. We've determined that we had a sufficient reserve that some of that money could be put into a new loader, and that's the loader that lives in our salt dome that's spent loading the trucks with sand and salt all winter. It's obviously a very harsh environment, and the loader is at the point where it needs replacement as well.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, through you to Mr. Jones. So these 3 items I did receive phone calls about. I don't know what that says about me, thinking might be an expert on mechanical items, but the concerns about the truck 15 replacement at the $80,000 from the residents was along the lines of, do we need such a great truck at $80,000? Is there a cheaper option? And then I'll just carry on to the street power sweeper replacement. I could not answer the question. How many of these do we have in our fleet, and how many should we have in our fleet? moving forward? And is there an option to not go forward if possible?
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Taylor, beginning with the Truck 15 replacement, we are looking at purchasing a 2-ton pickup truck. This isn't a small pickup truck. This is a larger pickup truck. Staff have determined that we need an additional 2-ton truck for heavier work, and that's why the cost is more expensive than a traditional smaller pickup truck that people would have. As it relates to the sweeper, we only have one sweeper that we own. We do contract out some sweeping services. Ultimately, street sweeping is one of those services that on the surface it may appear to be a nice to have, that somebody comes by and cleans the road from the sand, but all the sand that's put down over the course of the winter washes into our catch basin, starts plugging up our storm sewers and eventually our stormwater management ponds. By getting out there and sweeping the streets early, we minimize the amount of maintenance that's required in terms of sewer flushing and pond cleanouts later on, and it's actually more cost effective to do that way. If we did defer this item, the challenge would be that, as I've noted, this sweeper has been a maintenance-hungry piece of equipment, and with parts being difficult to get, we run into times when it's out of service, and we would rely more heavily on contracted services at a more expensive cost.
Thank you. Councillor Peters?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through to Mr. Jones, one thing to add to that list of the benefits of the sweeping would be for the increased number of cyclists in town using the roads as a safety concern. But my question, if I could get to that, was maybe just for the benefit of council and the public. Could you provide a bit more detail on the sweeping protocol, if you will, the times of year, number of repetitions throughout town, that sort of thing? Is there a standard operating procedure for when and how often, or is it weather-based? Just a bit more detail would be helpful.
Mr. Jones?
It is variable depending on different parts of town. To be honest, we try and run the sweepers down Broadway weekly during the summer, particularly when there's going to be events. You know, we were running the sweepers right before blues and jazz and so forth to try and keep the downtown streets cleaner. They also get dirtier more quickly because of heavier traffic. We try and get to the town, all of the roads in town, as quickly as possible following the winter to get them cleaned up. But as you say, it is somewhat weather dependent. In the summer, we get back out there and use them again.
Councillor Sherwood?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Jones, you mentioned that we own one, and this is obviously the one that you're wanting to replace, but that we do contract out additionals. Can you tell me how many we contract out additionally, and would it be a cost savings if we eliminated it and went completely with contract?
Mr. Jones?
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Sherwood, we do contract out to one company. Is our contractor for doing street sweeping, and they just have the one machine. It's been a while since we've done that analysis, but in the past our analysis has been that we're better off having the one machine and contracting out the remainder of the services. The one machine, while we certainly don't use it through the winter, can be used really from spring through fall. The contracted services focus primarily in the spring to get that spring cleanup done quickly, and then we're pretty much done with the contracting services, unless, as I've noted, the sweeper is down, in which case we try and bring them back in, and then there's additional costs.
Mr. Jones, one more question. So the lifespan of the sweeper would be what, projected?
This sort of machine should probably last in the order of 15 years. The one that we have has not lasted that long. With all pieces of equipment, there are risks, and some pieces of equipment are better pieces of equipment for us than others. The one that we currently have has not been a great machine for us. We're hoping that the next one lasts longer, and it should be in the order of about 15 years.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Taylor?
Thank you, Your Worship. The question regarding the power sweeper replacement has been taken from me, so I will move on to the Truck 15 replacement. And It's silly, but as taxpayers, we do silly things. And I guess my question is through you, Your Worship, to Mr. Jones. I've been told throughout the campaign and, you know, now that we're sitting here that we're fat cats and we drive luxury mobiles and have great expense accounts and this sort of thing. If we approve the Truck 15 replacement at $80,000, and it's unfair, but in your opinion, are we going to look like we've got a Cadillac out there and when we should be driving a Yugo? You know, the perception of that I worry about, and I think I owe it to the constituents to ask.
Mr. Jones.
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Taylor, the $80,000 budget, when we put forward budget estimates, we try and budget conservatively. We don't want to have to come back to council and say, gee, we budgeted $70,000 for that truck and it came in at 85, can we get an extra 15? Certainly, we use our procurement policy, and for vehicles like this, we would be going out to tender. We would be putting together a specification indicating what sort of vehicle we needed to do the job, and then all those dealerships who are looking to sell us one of those vehicles would likely bid on it, and we would purchase the cheapest. The key is that we are putting together a specification that needs to be met. These vehicles are, if I can use the expression, they're for go, they're not for show. These are hard-working vehicles that are out there every day. They're hauling things around. There's sometimes blades on the front of them in the winter. They're towing trailers that are loaded down. And if we decided to go with the Yugo, as you say, we may run into more problems where these vehicles are in the shop being repaired more often than they are out on the road getting the work done. We need vehicles that are robust enough to be able to do the job so that our staff have the equipment that they need to do the job efficiently. And so I would say, no, I don't think we're looking like fat cats. I think that we're buying hard-working trucks for our hard-working staff.
Right, so the Lariat package with the moonroof and the XM, no, it's not in there? Okay.
Not in the specs, no.
Okay, Doug. All right, Councillor Taylor, back to you.
Okay, so thank you, Mr. Jones, for your help with those two things. They're a large amount of money, and I just didn't feel comfortable not having a conversation and putting those things across. So I would like to put forward a motion that we approve the Truck 15 replacement and the power or the street power sweeper as my motion.
And the loader?
I'm going to talk about two things.
Okay, you realize the loader is being paid out of reserves and is not part of the tax levy?
I do. Yeah, I do. We just haven't discussed it, so.
Okay, so your motion is to approve the F-250 pickup truck, is that correct, Mr. Jones? It's a 2-ton.
Yes, sir, it is a 2-ton.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, and, yeah. So that's your motion. Do we have a seconder? Deputy Mayor McIntosh. Okay, let's have some more commentary. Councillor Andrews.
Thank you very much. And not to prolong this, and I certainly respect the comments that Mr. Jones has brought forward and the necessity to have reliable, efficient, and critical equipment. And again, I'm coming from a different lens on this one here, just for 30 seconds. And again, maybe you can provide some clarity on this. Has there ever been a thought of looking at, other sources to obtain some vehicles that may have, a little bit of use? And again, I don't know the history, and again, I apologize for not posing a question to you earlier, but, I'm sitting here listening to Councillor Taylor and some of the other council members mention, and I don't want to have the perception of a luxury item. I certainly understand the importance of having reliable equipment that does not pose long-term risks. But there are also other locations or other municipalities or other entities that have surplus equipment that may have been, used for a year or two. Not to say that they've been an encumbrance type of vehicle, they've had problems with it, but has that ever been sourced out?
Mr. Jones.
Through your worship to Councillor Andrews, I don't believe that that's ever been sourced out, and I think that that's because what you're describing is quite rare. It's typical for municipalities to purchase their vehicles and equipment, and the need for them doesn't go away. We don't, I can't really speak for other municipalities, but typically vehicles aren't getting purchased that aren't needed. When they're purchased, they are vehicles that are needed, and they continue to be needed. There's a couple of spots in the budget, I think, where there has been funding that's called other, where it is the salvage value for the vehicles. Certainly when our vehicles are at the end of their life cycle, they go to auction, we get a little bit of money back. But when they're going to auction, they've reached the end of their life cycle for us. I don't think that's the sort of equipment that we want to bring in. That's the sort of equipment that we're getting rid of so that we can get stuff that's more reliable.
I was not implying in any way. It's just, just out of curiosity, looking at it, because again, you see those situations where there are some municipalities, there are other, private sector entities that may have over-purchased, and, there may be, one of those needles in the haystack that might be available for, maybe a price point that's a little bit less. But again, I'm not in any way implying that we move down this way. It was just, a question of curiosity. Thank you.
Councillor Sherwood.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Jones. If we're talking about fleet, I wanted to bring up vehicle replacement truck 12 as well. It's part of water, even though it kind of falls in the division at a cost of $90,000. I think if we're talking about the cost of a 2-ton for the truck 15 at 80, you're looking at another 2-ton here being at 90. Now, I know it's not coming out of water reserves, but it's still coming out of our reserves. So I'm just thinking if we're trying to pool together all the fleet, I wanted to discuss about why the difference in cost for a truck 12 water vehicle at $90,000.
Mr. Jones.
Through your worship, that is also a 2-ton, and to be honest, I can't explain it. It's a good catch. Obviously, the two cost estimates were done at different times. What would likely happen is typically infrastructure services and community services gets together at one time during the year, and we put together a large tender for all of this sort of vehicle that we're buying. If it's something like a snow plow or a specialty type of vehicle, that would be a separate tender. But all of our pickup trucks, whether they be half-ton or 2-ton, would all be tendered at the same time, so that all the monies that we have for those vehicles would go into the one pot to purchase those vehicles, and hopefully the intent is that there'd be sufficient money in place. So I don't have a good rationale for why this is 90 and the other one is $80,000. Hopefully they're both less.
And I was just going to follow up on that. Would there be any, I know it doesn't seem like a significant loss, but I'm wondering, can we reduce that to $80,000, and hopefully you can find something that will fit within that budget?
Through your worship to Councillor Sherwood, it certainly is something that if you wanted to decrease it by the $10,000, we could. Ultimately, in the big scheme of things, the cost of these trucks at tender will be the cost of these trucks at tender, and that's what we'll pay regardless of what we've budgeted.
Yeah. And I'm respectful that it's coming out of water reserves anyway, but I'm just still mindful of using up our reserves. It's just an observation.
Thank you. So we're back to considering the motion, which was to approve truck 15 replacement and the street power sweeper replacement. We had a motion from Councillor Taylor. It was seconded. I'll call a vote now. All in favor? Okay, so we're passed unanimously. So the last item on the Public Works docket was loader replacement. Does anybody want to talk to that issue? Okay, I'd like to make a motion to approve that, seconded by Deputy Mayor McIntosh. Any further comment on that item? This is the loader, $240,000 being paid for out of reserves and other, seconded by Deputy Mayor McIntosh. Councillor Taylor.
Yes, thanks. Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just curious, what is the other on that? Where would that go? I guess it's just a newbie question, but
yeah, we have 210,000 of reserves, Mr. Jones, and then another column there other $30,000. Mr. Jones?
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Taylor, that would be the salvage value of the vehicle. It would go to auction, and that's approximately what we think we could get from it at auction.
Okay. Any further comment or questions on that motion? Okay, let's call a vote. All in favor? Unanimously approved. So we've completed Public Works. So shall we go on to water here? I believe what's left is the SCADA system and vehicle replacement, truck 12, and well 10 filter media replacement. The other 3 items have already been approved. I'm sorry, and the Venturi meter replacement, I'm sorry. Yeah. Do we, Councillor Sherwood?
I was just, Your Worship, thinking maybe to move things along, if we could pool together approving or recommending that we pool the water and wastewater together and approve it all as a group for anything that we haven't already discussed. So I'd put a motion to put that forward.
Right. I believe all wastewater's been approved
Okay.
already.
Okay, so I just want to make sure we had everything there covered in the
Okay,
wastewater.
So under water, we have 4 items left, and you're suggesting
That
we
we
pool
pull
those
it-
together as
yes.
a motion to approve?
Yes.
May we have a seconder for that? Councillor Post. Any further comment on that motion? All in favor? Okay, that's passed unanimously, so water items are approved. Moving on, we've got library services, and we have 7 minutes till 11 p.m. So, we might be able to get through this, folks. Councillor Taylor. Sorry.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. As a former library board chair, I can tell you that there isn't anything here. The library collections piece is out of reserves. It's something that's done on a regular basis, and it's done with professionalism. And the equipment and the network infrastructure are minimal asks. My motion would be to approve the library board asks and budget, or not budget, excuse me, the asks here, and let Ms. Fraser be able to go forward with her plans.
Okay, and seconded by Councillor Post. Any further comments from councillors? I have a question. This is falling under Mr. Osmond currently? Okay, so library collections, can you expand upon that a little bit for me, just to, we can understand the ins and outs of, I'm sorry? Oh. Oh, I'm sorry.
But again, for the sake of clarity, maybe Mr. Osmond can provide you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah,
Your Worship,
sorry.
just to cover off a couple items, first of all, the $190,000 has been in place for the last 2 or 3 years. The number is pretty standard, it's been that way for 3 years now. There's actually $43,000 is earmarked for e-resources, various digital pieces
Okay.
and connections and so on and so forth. And the physical materials, including all your journals and magazines and all those hard copy books and that kind of thing, is $146,000, and that's how it's
up.
programmed. And they've been doing that now with some success, and of course they do get rid of books over time and so on and so forth, and replenish. And that's been their standard for the last 3 years.
Great. Okay, any other comments on this? Okay, so we'll call a vote. All in favor? Passed unanimously. Okay, now we have police items. We've got fleet vehicles unallocated and a firewall refresh. Any comments from councillors? Councillor Taylor. Sorry.
So we discussed this in our last PSB meeting. It's a regular item. It's being taken out of reserves. It needs to be done. That was what was presented to us at the PSB meeting. I really don't see this as a big issue. And then the same thing with the firewall refresh. something that needs to be done. It's general maintenance. These are very simple asks, so my motion would be that we approve these, and then I'd like to come back and make a motion to adjourn.
Okay. We have a seconder for that motion. Deputy Mayor McIntosh. Any further comment on this? So this motion is to approve the 2 police budget items. All in favor? Unanimously approved. Now, these other 2 items here, the federal gas tax and the OCIF, is that something we need to? No, that's just positive revenue for us. Now, before we adjourn, I wonder if we could just have a recap, if Deputy Treasurer could maybe throw up where we are right now on the screen. That would be great. So are we at, is that 0.54? Is that what I'm seeing there?
Yeah, Your Worship, we are at 0.54, and I guess there's still a couple items that we are supposed to discuss, one being Harvey Curry Park, and we can go from there.
Well, it's 2 minutes to 11. I'll let Councillor Post have a comment, but I'm thinking it's maybe time to call it a night here. But let's have Councillor Post.
Yeah, I just had a really quick question. I agree. I think it's time to go. But I do notice that the additional capital project decreases are at $40,000 right now. And maybe it's just up at the top or something, but I'm not seeing, the numbers that I'm looking at, we have added 50,000, but it looks like we've taken off substantially more than 40,000 by taking off $160,000 for the parking, 40,000 we took off of the website design, and then an additional 40,000 that we took off of the basement renovation. And I know we did add some other things in, but I don't think we balance it at 40,000 removed. So just for clarification.
Sorry, do you have clarity on that, Mr. Brennan?
Yes, Your Worship, I do. In reality, what we've done so far, we have made some changes, $50,000 to the feasibility study, reduction of $40,000 at Town Hall basement, actually $40,000 for the basement, a minus $40,000 for the web design, a minus $25,000 for current court. We have also reduced the $160,000. We've also are calculating for the $175,000 change from last night. So all in all, we are at minus $215,000. Am I right there? 215. So.
Yeah. So the 175 is added back.
Correct.
Back, right. So the 40 is correct with the 175 back. Okay. So with that being clear now, may I have a motion to adjourn this meeting? Councillor or Deputy Mayor McIntosh, seconded by Councillor Sherwood. All in favor? Thank you very much, everyone.